this computer. Here we go. Was there a successful Zoom yelling at you? Okay, cool. So yes, let me put a link to the schedule. And I should be able to share this. And anyone with the link can edit it. Okay, yeah, what the hell? If you feel like editing it, go for it. I can track the changes. Okay. So that you'll see the schedule from last time as well. And let me put this up on the screen. And I guess probably the first order of business is to introduce Mark, because Mark was not here last week, but is here now. And so could you introduce yourself and tell us about you?
Hi, yeah, my name is Mark. I work at Michigan State University. I actually built there is 2 office doors down from me, although I'm in my house now. So actually it's a mile and 2 office doors down from me. I'm a social psychologist by training, but have been interested in these ideas of replication and incorporating them in the classroom for since I guess I was, well, in replication since I was a grad student, and incorporating the classroom once I started teaching and seeing how things went down in that capacity. And then I've been working with the CREP in various capacities since I guess 2013, give or take. Yeah, it's been really great to see it kind of transform over the years. And so we're excited that we're able to do these workshops to kind of further help build the community and help people with their teaching. So yeah, I couldn't be here last time because I was traveling, but I'm happy to be here now and to see how this all goes. So thanks for everybody for coming and joining.
Thank you so much, Mark. And also, I wasn't sure if you'd be able to make it today, but it looks like Holly was able to join. Some of you have probably only heard from Holly over email. Are you there? Feels like a
I'm here.
seance. Okay,
I just
good.
didn't know I was going to talk. So.
Oh, sorry. Do you want me to introduce you?
I mean, I can introduce myself, I guess.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm Holly. I just graduated with my master's from Avila University. My area of interest is music cognition. I am the admin area of the CREP, so I do just a lot of the keeping track of all the projects that we have going and just kind of helping get everyone the answers they need and connected to the right people. And I'm running the new peer mentor program. So we're going to have students come and kind of work with us that have done great projects before and kind of assist on the projects we have going. So I'm super excited to get that started and see where they go from there.
Yeah. And Holly is just a miracle worker. I will like wake up in a panic in the middle of the night thinking about things I need to do. And then I'll go to my email and Holly will have done them already. So, and she may indeed be looking for a PhD program at some point. So, you know, if you have any thoughts, send them my way or her way or our way. Either way is fine. Okay. So other updates. Are there any big questions from last time or anything lingering? I know I have a few people who have some like stuff going on, and just note, come and go as you need to. We're going to be in breakout rooms today, and it's for a lot of today, and it's going to be hard to record those, but I think given the schedule, you'll have like a sense of what we're doing with that time. I do owe you all an email to get your tax information from you, and that should probably be coming, hopefully from Holly. We'll talk about that later. A lot of you, I have that information already, but I want to make sure I get you your payments for the summer. And then I wanted to briefly mention the individual meetings are next week. So those aren't required. We certainly encourage them, but if you sort of don't need them, or if you're not sure how to use them, you might as well go ahead and like show up and we can talk through it. But if you don't think you need that, that's fine. Don't feel like that's something that you kind of have to like show up and do if you don't have questions or you kind of know how you tailor this to your class. We don't want to make it awkward. I have enough of that in my life already. So what we think we're going to do with the schedule is plan on being here the normal time from 10 to 2 Central on Wednesday. But then if that time doesn't work for you, email me, and I'll make sure, or all three of us, and we'll kind of see like who can, and let us know what your free times are next week, and we'll see like who can meet with you. And if, you know, if there's a specific person who, like, based on their experience, you really want to meet with, let me know. It's not, you're not going to offend any of us. Many of you have spent a lot of time talking to me, and like, you can totally like branch out and get another person's perspective. Cause I have a fairly, I have my own perspective. So, questions about that, about the individual meetings? Okay, so we're really excited to get this going for today. This is the first time we've done something like this. And so when Mark and I were chatting yesterday, one of the things I said was like, I'm really glad that we're paying them and they're not paying us, because this is kind of like a trial run on these things. And I'm really interested to see how it goes. One of the things people have asked us to do before is like to have an experience of what it's like for for students who are doing CREP projects. So to actually like run through the assignment itself. So we're going to do like a mini mock trial run of doing this and break everybody, just like I'm going to pretend I'm an instructor for a class where like I'm breaking you up into like 4 random groups, and I'll put you in a breakout room and you'll pull up the step-by-step guide. In fact, I'll have the link for that. I'm going to put the link for that in the chat right now, so you have it. It's linked on our website, and on our OSF page, and was probably the first thing I did. Oh, Arkansas has a person doing psychology of music. Holly, did you see that?
I did.
Okay. So there's a step-by-step guide, and what you'll do is you'll pull the step-by-step guide just up, just like you're a student, and walk through each of the steps. And what we hope to do is, you know, from 10:10 to 10:25, select your studies, maybe get started on creating your OSF page, and you can create it just like it says to do it in the step-by-step guide. You can always delete it later. So, and I actually think that might be a good idea. Like once you run through the mock project, to delete it later, or maybe to never make it public. Just so when people go back and they're looking for like, well, who did replicate the study? They don't see this like, you know, study, or just make it really clear that it's a mock study that you're setting up. And then start to like gather the materials, figure out how you're going to like break up responsibilities. And one of the things that I think would be helpful to come out of this is an idea for us of like where students might get caught up on some of these steps and how things can be said more clearly. So if you can take, like, if something is confusing, jot down where it is. I'm more expecting some of that to happen toward the end with the submission, but it's like, I've been doing this for so long, and I wrote the step-by-step guide for the most part. So who knows what other people will find confusing. ChatGPT seemed to like it, but you know, that's only that as an AI language model, they can't really tell me much. So, okay. I think that's all of the introducing I need to do. Are there any questions? What questions do you have for me?
I have one.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, I have a OSF page, like an OSF profile.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend using this or creating a new one?
Use your OSF profile. Yeah.
Okay.
Just go ahead and do that. And if you don't have an OSF profile yet, that is part of the step-by-step guide too. So it should be totally encapsulated, and like you have all of the things you need to go right there. Okay. I am going to awkwardly try to figure out how to put you in breakout rooms. So I'm going to do 4. I'm going to do about 3 people per group. And again, there are a couple of people who might be in and out. And that's something that would happen with students too. So, okay, assign. Oh, okay. Okay. I think I'm doing this. I said it was going to be awkward. I feel like I gave you warning on that. Okay. Okay, and so while you're in there, you can ask the host to join you. So if you have a question, I can run in. I'm going to pause recording in the main room. You can also send me a message, or we'll kind of try to maybe hop in every once in a while, but not be distracting. So good luck. We'll be
Okay,
here.
just to clarify, so we are working through the step-by-step.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. All right. Pause recording.
It's actually that's the kind of part that's always annoying about like any class or book on the topic is they're like, oh yeah, sometimes that'll happen, and you're like, I don't know, it's like 70% of my time.
Every time.
Like I
I
tell
love
my
that.
students, you know, when we do analyses of psychology studies and how often they confirm the hypotheses, right? Like 90% of published psychology studies confirm the hypotheses. And I tell my students, actually, in real life, it's the other way around. About 10% of my hypotheses are supported, and the other 90% they aren't.
10%. That's the dream. So okay, so hi, welcome back. I did hit record again. So keep it family friendly. I'm just kidding. I still have to post last week's recording too. I'm having some YouTube issues, but I plan on working on that today a little bit. So we are at the point where we're going to have folks walk through the editing the OSF pages. Don't worry about recording a procedure video. If we would like to see that you have materials together and that you can kind of see like how to request a review. And you don't have to actually fill out the request a review form. So if you do, Holly can just go in and delete it later. She'll know that it's a mock request. And then, so we're gonna work on that for a while, but also if it doesn't take you that long and you want to come back to the main room and talk about CREP or kind of take some time, like use that time to like work on looking stuff up, I think that would be fine too. I think I have told everyone this. I added a sample email to the workshop schedules set of slides. It just felt like the most centralized place to like add information as we went along because we all had the link to that. So there's a sample email on slide 5 that shows you what whoever signs up as a contact person on the getting started form would receive from our group. Now the thing about having the regular Zoom meetings is changing a little bit for this next year. We're just going to make them sort of open. Whatever project you're working on, you can come to a Zoom meeting. They have been like the Cameron group meets at this time and the Stellar group meets at this time. And we're just going to have open meetings when anybody working on any project can come. And then I also added a set of notes or wish list items. And I just want to take a second. When you come across things where you're like, this would be helpful, or this is a little confusing, feel free to add things here. You put your name next to it. If it's not like really clear what you're talking about, I can come and ask you about it later. Or if you want to add something anonymously, that's fine too. There's a rabbit in there now. So there have been a few things that have come up in groups that I have added. And if there are videos, like the goal is really to have a set of like plug and play materials for instructors. So if you could use, you know, a 5-minute video on how to get a survey started in Qualtrics or import something into Qualtrics, just add it to the wish list. And that's the kind of thing that would support our projects. And we can work on it during the teaching hackathon, or Holly and I can work on putting those things together during the period of the grant. That kind of wish list thing is super helpful for us in figuring out like what needs you have and what can be supported in your teaching. Okay. So once we are, yeah, so we'll put you into breakout rooms again, and then work on that review thing. We'll kind of try to pop in some more, but feel free to call us in again. It seems like that's going pretty well. And then in about an hour, a little under an hour, we will get back together and we'll walk through what a review looks like. And then we'll walk through, you know, that process of posting things at the end. We'll take another break this afternoon, and then after that, I'll show you some examples of projects that have been done well, and then spend some more time. I think the conversation we had last week, where we talked about how different classes could implement this in different ways, I think that was really useful. So I'd like to keep trying to have those conversations. And yeah, and then that's our day. So I'll go ahead and put you into breakout rooms. Are there any quick questions before we work on
I do
that?
have a quick question.
Yeah.
It was something that Anton and Lisa were talking about in our small groups. And I guess it might be like the answer, it depends. But a lot of when you fork the project, it seems like the wiki's kind of like there's already like a template there, like there's like a lot of like good stuff established. And I was wondering do you know what's like common of like, do you have students completely like reset it and just use it as a template, or do you just say if that's good enough, that's good enough, or is it like depends on how intensive the instructor wants the students to be in the weeds? Or because I feel like there's like a lot of good preset stuff there, but then is that like a teaching? I guess I just don't know what's common or like what is recommended.
Right. It can really, and it does really depend. But so for me, like as an instructor, when I use this, and actually as a reviewer, I like to see like whatever we forked over from the original page is clearly marked, like this is from the original page. And this is stuff that's specific to our institution or to our class or to our replication. And then there also will be forked files that came over. Like I like to, you know, make it clear like that is from the original, so they can kind of see like maybe how you adapted those things. And some people do a lot of editing. And you know, if you have multiple groups doing the same projects, like you can have multiple sets of files and you'll have to like kind of describe that in the wiki. So, but there is a lot of room for an instructor to say, no, this is how I want it. This is, I would like you to set it up a very specific way. And I'll show you a couple of examples of different ways folks have done that this afternoon.
Awesome,
I'm a
thanks.
minimalist, which is a really polite way of saying that mine probably aren't the best. So yeah. Okay. Let me open up your rooms for you. And then, yeah, if you have any other questions, you can hang out for a second. Otherwise, I'm going to send, oh, Bill, you're going to be all alone, but.
It's totally fine. Totally fine. Is the goal to get to the point where you request a review in the to-do document? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right. I'll make my own thing because I wanted to do a different study. So
yay. Okay.
I'll keep busy.
Yeah. Feel free to, yeah.
Cool.
Grab
Okay.
me.
Will do.
And last time I said drag, and it was like, that you're not dragging me. I want to be there. Hi. How are you doing?
Hi. Sorry. Good.
Are you doing all this on your iPhone?
I am, because my school doesn't believe in supporting good technology. So our computer laptops videos don't work.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
Yes. No worries though. I have my
I'm
computer
sorry.
up. So
Yeah.
the phone is fine. And actually I think my phone camera is better. So it really
It's
All right.
funny. I'm in this project management class on Tuesday and Thursday nights. It's a 6-week class, and I'm with a bunch of people from all different disciplines. They noticed that I seemed to always be wearing a Texas A&M Texarkana t-shirt. And they said, and I said, what I do is I have in my closet, basically when I go to get a shirt out, I basically get the first one on the rack. It doesn't really matter what it is. I just go from the front to the back. And so all of my A&M Texarkana shirts, whenever they get washed, they get put in the front of my closet. And I just pick the next one. And I was explaining that as trying to reduce cognitive load as much as like
Yes. Yeah.
they were like flabbergasted.
Why would you do that? I am definitely going to break into your house and hang some t-shirts up in your closet that you will just reach in and grab that say like whatever I want on them. That is not actually, I was recording that. I feel like I need to edit that later.
Jordan,
I will not
like
break into anyone's house. Okay.
That's at the same time very sweet and creepy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's my vibe. So what we are going to do now is talk about the review process a little bit. I think this is a feature of the CREP procedure that instructors get the second pair of eyes on the students' projects, but also does help ensure the fidelity. I am going to have Mark walk us through this bit. Okay, I'm turning it over.
All right, cool. So the idea with so I kind of first give you a high level, and then I'll kind of get more like annoyingly specific, I think. But so the idea with the review procedure is that we want and would really like that people who are following up on this work and are interested in these studies can have some degree of confidence in the data that's being collected with the CREP. And having this review procedure helps us ensure that we are provide at least additional assurances that the data will be of sufficient quality that'll be useful for people. In some respects, what this ends up in, so what happens is you'll submit for review and it'll go to, there's an executive reviewer or two that's associated with each study, and it'll go with one of them, and they'll select 2 reviewers. The reviewers are often people with master's degrees or higher. So there's some PhD students, but there's some professors and kind of everybody in between who tend to review the same studies over and over again. So they've seen your study before, just other people kind of going through and doing it. And they kind of they check and see are these CREP pages on the OSF, are they clear for somebody who is not in your head or not in your student's head? And does it have sufficient detail that we can kind of tell what's going to be done or what was done? This is helpful both for ensuring, because sometimes you'll find that people are maybe a little bit unclear on how exactly they're going to collect data, and that might be because the students were actually unsure about how they were going to collect data, and so this helps initiate conversations that maybe they should have had earlier. Other times it's just a matter of making it clear on the OSF page and then the future pre-registration what was done and how it was done and stuff like that. And so it just makes it sure that it's clearer in that way. And so a lot of it is just making sure the information is there, making sure that the information is presented in a clear way, and that somebody who's not in somebody's head will ought to be able to understand it later. These reviewers, they look at it and then they write little bits of feedback, kind of like you might see on a peer-reviewed journal article, although the level of detail and the specific things they're commenting on are different. They're not going to tell you that your framing of your theory is bad or anything like that. And it's really geared towards making the projects better, which is not always my experience with the peer review, at least. So I think in general it aims to be good. They send these to the executive reviewer. The executive reviewer then goes through, reads them, and picks out the stuff that really needs to be done versus the stuff that would be nice to be done versus the stuff that maybe there was some misunderstanding somewhere along the way. Typically what happens is that you will get a decision that's something like a revise and resubmit sort of thing. And you basically need to maybe make some changes, clarify a few things, and then send it back to the executive reviewer, who then just kind of then signs off. That's, yep, this is good to go, or no, maybe you need to do, maybe something is still unclear or not. Usually that second revise and resubmit thing is much faster than the initial one. We try to do the initial one within 2 weeks, and try to do the next one within basically a week after it gets resubmitted. So that ends up being kind of the process overall. I'm going to show you one of these reviews from a study that I helped was an executive reviewer on. So this was for a CREP project there's a study by Denise and colleagues who are this is a French authorship team. They were looking at how people respond to questions on the cognitive reflection task, which is this measure that assesses like whether people are making decisions more intuitively, or whether they stop and reflect on this intuitive answer and realize it might be wrong. And basically their research question is, when people get this wrong, do they have some maybe underlying sense that they might be wrong or not? And by getting a sense of whether they're less confident in their responses. And there are some experimental manipulations in there. I'm, of course, describing this incompletely, I'm sure. But this is the kind of project. You can run it on paper and pencil, which we had some teams do, and you could run it on Qualtrics, which is what this team did. And so what they get is this, this is a pre-data collection review, so it's before the study's run. Basically what we say is here is at this stage, there are some issues that need to be addressed. So it's a revised decision. And then we try to detail what those changes are below. So these are the changes that I, after reading through the project myself, as well as reading through the reviews, kind of identified as those issues that seemed the most relevant to fix, the most necessary to fix. So one issue with this project, for example, is that they included their Qualtrics files, but if you're familiar with Qualtrics, you can export your survey either in Qualtrics's proprietary format or as a Word file, so Microsoft's proprietary format. And it's just almost impossible to read a Qualtrics file. In theory, you can open it up as a text file, and then if you can read their code, you could figure it out, but no normal human does this. And so the Word file is for normal human eyes. And so we recommended that they export that and include that. We asked them to describe their planned analysis. They didn't really have much of anything about this. And so even just explicitly saying, look, we're going to just do the exact same thing in the original study is useful. More detail than this is also useful, so don't feel like you need to limit it to this. I mean, the more details on the planned analyses, I think the better. Helps students think things through and identify problems as they might arise. Just because oftentimes when you're specifying planned analyses, you might realize what you are more or less capable of. At least, yeah, sometimes you find that maybe what you have planned isn't what's you're also able to do so easily. And then we also think it's important to specify what the crucial hypothesis is. In some of these studies, they have a bunch of like maybe not pilot test data, manipulation check type things, which is useful and good to know. But they'll have like subsidiary hypotheses or interactions that they thought were interesting, but are not central. And it's useful to kind of highlight what you're considering as the most central hypothesis. In this particular project, they included an extension hypothesis. I don't actually have any memory of what these are, but they included them, but they didn't say much about what they were or why they were doing them. They're just like, here's a list of measures we're including for extension hypotheses. And although this is kind of okay, that we're not going to really hold you back for this, I think it's useful to be clear about what those purposes are. It doesn't have to be a fully fleshed out introduction to a paper, but even just 1 or 2 sentences, like we think that people will respond differently in this condition if they're, are higher in SES, or they are more open to experience, or they have more motivation, or whatever it might be, is I think useful just to give some context to that. And then the other thing I just want to point out that this sometimes happens, reviewer 2 made a suggestion that I think was fine, but it's not really something that's necessary for the project. And so also just kind of try to highlight like maybe some of the stuff that you might be able to ignore. And then the final piece of advice that gets included not in everyone, but in many of them, is that it's just, I think, useful for your students or for yourself to remember that this information on the OSF is not just for you, but it's also for other people trying to understand what your study is about and what they're doing. And so it's important to give people those kind of context. Below is then the actual reviews. So we have reviewer 1 and reviewer 2. They differ in length, as you can see here. I'm not going to read every word on these reviews. Don't worry, that's not super exciting to hear. But they vary a lot in kind of what's detailed and what's not. In general, I think it's useful to go through the reviews and see what is maybe useful advice, even if your executive reviewer up top didn't mention it. Sometimes people just find things unclear, and it's a way of trying to address those unclear things at an earlier stage. In this case, for example, reviewer 1 has some suggestions about setting up the wiki. Apparently there was a symbol used that kind of made the markdown, that's the language underlying the wiki, kind of go a bit wonky. And they had a suggestion about that. The video didn't have sound, but that's kind of okay for this project. It's an online survey. It doesn't have sound in and of itself. So unless as a participant, they're listening to records in the background or something, you're doing an online survey is typically a pretty silent experience. And then this is our suggestion for adding the Word file and not just the QSF. Reviewer 2 had more things to say, including maybe how the team might be described, which maybe is useful, but is not so necessary. This comment here about not so sufficient information about the original study and what it's trying to do and what results are attempting to replicate. This is what inspired my suggestion to the team to go through and basically specify what really the key hypotheses were that they're trying to test. There is some confusion about exactly how the survey was set up and so on. This, in my experience, is these kind of combination of reviews are pretty typical to many of the reviews that we get. They vary in style and precise content, but the kind of issues are pretty similar. It varies between, here's some advice for what could make this easier to understand, to maybe more specific wording choices that maybe were unclear for the reviewer. The reviewers also go through and check to see if the materials are posted, and they'll sometimes comment on ethics being available or not. When people submit these reviews, ethics is not always totally figured out, so that's not a deal breaker, but sometimes does come up. This is here they're commenting that it is available. So this is kind of the standard review process, I would say, and some of the reviews that people can get on these. Of the studies I've been executive reviewer for over the years, I find these to be pretty typical set. I know that some of you have also been through this experience of doing the CREP stuff and reviews, and maybe some of you are reviewers yourselves, and might also have experiences and perspectives that are useful to share. And yeah, if you want to do that, that's cool. But otherwise, if anybody has any questions or comments about this process, yeah, happy to open the floor to those.
I would assume that it's generally better for us to frame the results of the review for our students. I can imagine students being sort of overwhelmed or maybe discouraged when they get reviews back, being new to research and so on.
Yeah, so that's an excellent point. We send the reviews back to whatever the contact is on the project. Sometimes that's the instructor, sometimes it's a student, sometimes it's an instructor and a student. So that's something to think about on how those get set up when you're planning your course. If it's going to go back to your students and you or just the students, that's fine. And pretty normal actually. So don't worry about that if that's what you're doing. But it might be a good opportunity to kind of like prepare them a little bit for what might happen. And to be like, hey, look, like, here's how this normally goes. You're going to get feedback that suggests that things need to be improved. And probably useful to be clear the extent such feedback is reflective in their final grade. I'm assuming probably not at all for most people's courses, but it's your class, so I don't know. But I think I would try to preempt that with some conversations to prepare them a little bit for that. In the feedback, I personally, the feedback, what you saw there is pretty cut and dried. I'm not giving like effusive praise, but nor am I, insulting their intelligence or anything like this. And at least I hope that's the case. But of course, like if you're not used to getting this kind of feedback, that can still be just an unusual and different kind of experience. Yeah.
I'm wondering if somebody might be able to chat about doing the review process in instances where like small groups are submitting individual projects versus the entire class is doing one. And which is what I'm thinking about doing, and like how you get all your students to have that review experience, but not having them all submit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so each project should only be submitted once anyways. So like, so if you have one class doing one big review, or not one big review, sorry, one big project. And so then that'll just get reviewed once. It kind of depends a little bit on what you want them to get out of that experience. So you could imagine that if you want every student to like carefully consider the reviews and thinking about what changes to be made, I could imagine making a little assignment where the reviews come back and then you're like, okay, what would we change to fix these reviews on the OSF, and have them submit that as an assignment. And then, you talk about it in class, or you have them do this as a class activity or something like this, and then you make those changes in the class. But you could have them do that with the smaller group projects too, actually. I think that would be possible, although the timing would be potentially difficult because the reviews coming in all at the same time for all of the projects, I have to say, is probably pretty unlikely that all works out. But that's kind of how I would think about it. But maybe there's other challenges that you see or have other ideas that you were thinking about as you were considering this.
No, I'm just brand new and don't really know what I'm doing.
That's
So,
fine. That's all right. But yeah, that's how I think, if for those things where you want them to like think more deeply about the reviews, I would kind of maybe try to integrate it into a class activity somehow. Especially because it's also hard to predict exactly what the reviews will contain before you get them, right? So sometimes the reviews come back and they're actually like, yeah, this was good, go collect data. So you don't want to maybe play on an assignment worth points around that, because that's a pretty, straightforward assignment, I guess, at the end of if that's the outcome. But having a class activity where you talk about that is probably doable and might be able to make that work. So and Ellen has rogue submissions. That's pretty exciting. It's also useful for when you have your email on it, so at least you know it happens. Yeah.
This was like and this will happen sometimes. It happens to a lot of people actually. And we'll contact them like, do you know, like, are these two different groups that are doing the same project? Like sometimes they'll have the same email addresses, and it's really easy to figure out on our end. And like I was explaining to somebody earlier, I'm like, when these things happen, I tend to see them as like, okay, we need to improve that experience a little bit so the instructions are a little bit more clear. So I think I added something to the form at that point that was like only once per group or something like that. Yeah. Are we good? We want to see some final submissions?
I was going to ask you, do you know when this sort of formal review process was put in place? About what year?
I think we were doing it close to from the beginning.
Because I remember when I did mine in like 2016, 2017, I think I was just communicating informally with John Gray, if I remember right.
Yeah, I mean, that's we had some degree of review from the beginning, but also like how exactly the process worked out has shifted a little bit over time as we tried to institutionalize some things. But
yeah, I like this better.
Well, like, and like Brady was saying last week, I mean, Mark talked about how he broke CREP. And so at that point, like a couple of the more informal procedures had to be a little bit more formal. Like we needed, instead of John kind of calling up a couple of people who had been involved in CREP and saying, can you look at this project? Let me know what you think. Like it was more like, okay, we need to actual outside reviewers. And I think probably what happened is that it was reviewed at that point. I still have a list of all of the projects. So I'm looking at your project from, I'm looking for it from 2016. John spelled my name wrong a lot, which I think is really funny. I keep finding that in the spreadsheet. Yeah, so, and it will be even different again, like a year from now. I mean, we'll have instructions on how it will be different, but when we get this new reviewer system, we're going to be doing everything on like an LMS type thing. What goes into it and what comes out of it will stay the same. It's just the logistics will change a little bit. So we'll always have people like looking at the same types of things on a student's project. And then we'll also have like the same type of general review that comes back from the executive reviewer. It'll just happen in a slightly different way. For people who are just reviewers, it may not look that different at all, because I think we're all going to keep that on the Google Forms. And this is how we get reviews. I put in a link to the reviewer form for you to sign up to be a reviewer if you are not one already. Once you do become a reviewer and we have a project that needs to be reviewed, you will see this CREP reviewer form sent to you along with a review request, where you'll put in like your name, your project number, is it pre-data collection or post-data collection? Let me share my screen so you can see the stuff beyond the first thing. Okay, and then yeah, so, and then if it's a pre-data collection review, you'll mark like, is this an initial review? Is this a revision? We do have those sometimes. We ask you to review the project's main page and provide feedback, the materials, the video procedure, and then any general suggestions. And then, similar questions for the post-data collection review. We ask people if they completed a review of the project prior to data collection? A lot of them say I'm not sure, which is valid.
And then just things to double check, but then some questions about, these. So there are guided questions as people walk through these. And then they're done. And then we have, a thing down here for sending people a $10 payment and submitting tax forms. You can also send those in the mail again. But there's that should stay the same for the foreseeable future if that's how we collect the reviews from people. It's nice for us because then we get everything in one place. So our responses come in and we can compile them and send them out as needed to the executive reviewers. Seems to make things a lot easier for the executive reviewers too. I don't know if Mark would agree with that. I don't know how many reviews you've had lately. Have you had some?
Not a lot, but this is just because we was cycling in and out of studies that I was more or less involved with. But yeah.
So when, and how teams request the review to is also through a Google form. That's the reviewer form. If we want to actually see the review request, this is linked in the step-by-step guide, which is, I think it will be step, yes, reviewer request is down here. So maybe you all got to this point where you include your email address for communication, what type of review is being requested, project number, and then I think that is, oh yeah, if it's a pre-data collection review, one of the things that is really important for us to find out is when they plan on starting data collection, because we really, if somebody sends us a review request in January and they don't plan to start collecting data until April, we know that we have a little bit more time. But if somebody sends us one on March 31st and they want to start on April 2nd, we will really try to make that happen. And it's I know all of the projects pretty well. So worst case scenario is I usually end up jumping in, or I sometimes end up jumping in at the last minute to double check a project just because I know them so well and I know what reviews look like, and it takes me 10 minutes. So we do our best to try to make sure those projects can move forward in a timely way. Sometimes it doesn't happen. And I'm sorry in advance if that happens to you. I don't know how to fix it. And I'm sorry in retrospect if it did happen to you. We also try to have places on our forums where we ask, do you have any questions for us? So we can, at that point, respond to any issues that people have. Now, again, a lot of people don't tend to submit their projects for final review. So, and we're working on this, and this may be a great topic for the hackathon. But I want to show you some examples where people have had a completion awarded to them. So here's an example of the Troy et al. And you can kind of see here some of the ways that they have, and these are also in a lot of cases good examples of completed projects. We're kind of double dipping into that topic a little too. When are we taking our next break? I'm sorry, was it supposed to be already?
I believe it's at 1 Central.
Okay, so let me just get maybe started into this, and then we can talk a little bit more after the break. So you can see some examples of some things that they have done. I really like it when teams have their university, but also their project number in their title. I don't think any of these have that. This one, it doesn't look like they changed at all, and that's okay. It got through. Mine tend to have the actual project number in the title, and a lot of people will say, well, this is where this was completed. It was in this semester. They do have their project number here in their wiki. So this is one of the things that you just looked at editing. Here's their general information at the top. Here's their abstract from the original paper. They updated their methods here, I think. And then they talked about how many participants they had, what analyses they completed, and then they described, so they had one submission that they did for pre-data collection review. Then they collected their data and they updated their wiki for post data collection review. And if you look at their previous examples, you can probably see the differences. So let me go down here. So at one point it said analysis plan, right? And then at another point they went ahead and updated that to, we have run this study. And I think there are a few benefits to showing you this right now. So you can kind of see what people submit. So they have 4 things under data and results that they included. They have an R markdown, a code book, the raw data, and then they have a PDF that walks through the analyses. You can post this in any format. So you can post it in SPSS if you want. The one thing we ask is that you have a code book and really that the data is anonymized. So if you have students getting data straight out of Qualtrics, for example, I've had cases, many cases, I don't know, a few, where folks' IP addresses have been in there, and sometimes like their latitude and their longitude. And so that is something that we should catch in the final review is, is this anonymized? Or if it's at a small school, it may be worth looking at, like, okay, it's a student who is a certain age, like you may want to encourage them to post aggregate data if it's a small school, or if there's a way of figuring out who a participant could have been from what they have entered here. So we have their data, we have their code book, which is something we always ask for as well, because we need to know like what the different responses mean. And my OSF is being slow. So, what the variable is, and then how people respond to it. If you have experimental and control conditions, it's always helpful to know how they're coded. And their markdown will have, all of their script for running this in it. The results that we're looking for them to post, this is a pretty good example of, what we want to have is, and the analyses from the paper, from the direct replication at the very least, and kind of compare that to what the original paper found. And I think these folks did a pretty good job of running their model, summarizing it. It can look a lot of different ways. They've written it in APA style. It doesn't necessarily have to be an APA style. And they also have this nice graph. The other reason I like this project as an example is because I, as the kids say, rode the struggle bus when my class did this project on trying to figure out how to recreate this graph. And so what I did, this is just very scheming of me, was like wait around for other people to finish the project and then look at their code to see how they did it, because I'm like, I have no idea how I'm going to do this. So, and there have been people, we do have people who have done this in SPSS. So we have SPSS code for it too. I didn't do that because I'm poor. So, and I don't have SPSS. So there was one example. Here's another example. This is from the same instructor. So let me try to find one from a different university. This is one that I think Mark would have been the executive reviewer for. I think they actually posted their exec reviewer stuff on here too, which I don't see very often.
This executive reviewer interprets thing is that there was some confusion in the study and how exactly things were done. Mm-hmm. And so me and I think might have been John at some point. Anyways, we sat down, we were basically like, okay, this is what this really means. Okay. And included that in there, which is what this document is. Oh, wonderful. So this just came along for the ride for them when they forked their project, basically.
Okay, good for them. All right, so let me go back here and show you. And actually it's 1:00, so why don't I pick up with that after our break? We'll take another 15-minute break. So I'll see you back at 1:15. So take a little power nap. I'll go ahead and start this again. This isn't like super serious stuff, but Dana and I were chatting a little bit just as the break started about the completion process and completion certificates and stuff like that, which is not something that we have always had. And, you know, at some point in the beginning of CREPE's history, we had some funding from the Center for Open Science, and I think from SciChi maybe, to give students an award for completing projects. And so they would receive like $300 for sort of the easier projects, $400 for medium, $500 for hard. And that money eventually, you know, dried up, but at least for a little while. But we, you know, we were giving that money. And then we started at some point along the way, you know, students would sign a completion pledge that they had, which is another, you know, another quality assurance kind of thing, just making sure that they stand behind like what they've posted, and they submit for final review. And when all of that gets done and it's all acceptable, they get a completion certificate. So Dana and I had been chatting about this, and you know, Dana's project was from back in like 2016. I think before I was really that involved in any of like the administrative stuff. And so I went to look at Dana's project, and it's been completed. It was part of a, you know, a part of a publication. And so I just want to show you what these completion certificates look like. So I went ahead and made this up, and now I can change this too. I'm like, this was the university that was on the project at the time, and the student who was on the project. So, but this is what folks will get emailed to them once they have completed stuff, or in my case, sent to them through chat message on Zoom. So you should have that. Okay, so let me take a look with you, or show you around. I'm not Englishing very well right now. You know, some more of these completed projects, which again are also like good examples of completed projects in many cases. And then I'll kind of get through that, and we'll have some free time just to kind of chat about incorporating this into different classes. Okay. The one that I was just looking at was the one from, let's see. So that's Dana's. This is the one from St. Joseph's University. So this was spring of 2022. This is the Danae's, which we don't do anymore. And you can see the types of things that they have posted. They have a lot of information stored on here. They have the city ethics training for different students. If you want to post these, you can. You also can have private components on your project that you don't share with everybody. And that's how we handle a lot of things like this. We're like, we have IRB paperwork that we want to store with the project, but we don't necessarily, like, my phone number is on all of my IRB applications, so I don't necessarily want to share that with everybody. So I keep that as like a private component, but then have the approval letter from my institution shared publicly. Here are some more examples of data and output. I don't know that they ended up writing up their results. So they have a PDF of their code book. And if you all want to take a look, I'll post the link to this. This is just an SPSS created code book, which you can do in there, but it has all of the, I think, important information stored in here. And then like what types of levels there are, what the variable types are. Let me share this with you in the chat in case you want to see this yourself, because I'm doing a lot of clicking around. And okay, so here's their data. Which the nice thing about OSF is it will at least render SPSS data. and our markdowns and all, all sorts of things. Even if you don't have the program, you'll be able to see it. You won't be able to see, the code book or the variable view, but you will be able to see the data itself. They have, I believe, their output and their syntax. So let me just open this. Can I not open that in a new tab? That's annoying. Okay. Here is that's not something that we can look at. So that's their output. I think SPSS is kind of weird about their proprietary output. And that should have their results in it. Here is their syntax, and I do believe we'll be able to see this. And so you can see like what they ran on their studies. And I do see that they had a completion certificate, but I don't actually see that they have like a final write-up necessarily. Although that may have been, they may have done their final write-up on the wiki. Sometimes folks do that as well. Known deviations. So that it doesn't look like it. I'm not sure where they may not have done like the final write-up. Oh, here we go. Under data and results. They wrote it on, instead of uploading it as a separate file, they wrote it on their data and results wiki. So you can see like they had this number of participants. Here were their problems. They found their results with variables of accuracy and confidence and reported those, and then whether they were consistent or inconsistent with the original study. And so here's just another example of how they write this up and post this. And a lot of times you can get this from, a strong student paper. So one of the things, I think I mentioned this last time, that I tend to do at the end of my class when we all work on the same project and they all write the same empirical report is, whoever got the highest score on their empirical report, I'll take their paper and I'll post that as the result section, because it's already been written. I may edit it a little bit as it goes up, but then I also like to credit that student will move their name closer up to the front of the author list. So here you can see the contributors for this OSF page. If you were to cite this OSF page, and I actually thought there was a tool to do that on here somewhere. If you were to cite this OSF page, it would be, first author, second author, and so on. So I usually put my name at the end as like the senior supervising author. And then I'll move whatever student's work I tend to use, or whoever did a lot of work, I'll move their name closer to the front. I like talking about that with them too, because it's a nice way of showing them how like authorship is decided in team manuscripts, because it's sort of a baby version of that process, where, you figure out, well, who did more of what work and what was the most important thing and what is last author and blah, blah, blah. We get to talk about that a little bit. So these are the types of things we're looking for, again, when people submit their projects for final review and they are doing the completion thing. We also want their completion certificate. So we ask them to post their results and data, post an anonymized file with raw data. Discussion is encouraged, though not required. There was one project we did, was a partner project with the Psych Science Accelerator, where we didn't even ask them to do the results section because it would have been hard. It's a more complicated story than that, but that's basically what it came down to. We have them update their wikis. We have them sign a completion pledge and upload it. We have an example that they can click on from the step-by-step guide to see what it will look like when people upload them. And then request a final review, and then they are done with the project at that point, unless there are any revisions, which there often are. And it looks different ways. So I think one of the fun things to do for me is to look around at some of these studies. If I sign into the OSF, oh gosh, I think my password is wrong. Oh no, I got in. Okay. If I go to the main Troy et al. Page, and then I look at the different forks that have been made, some of them I can't see because they're not public, but some of them I can see. If I'm kind of struggling through, well, what should this look like at the end? I can look at other people's projects. So I'll look at this one because Nikki always does good work. Okay, so you know, you can see here, well, you can see they've used Jamovi. If you use Jamovi, or if you use R, you may be able to kind of look to see what some of them have done, what they found in their results. So you can kind of piece together, you know, what you might want to do from looking at what other people have done a little bit too, especially if they've posted a completion pledge and have had all of that stuff approved. I will very often look for experimental materials to see, you know, if somebody's programmed this in something already. A couple of the projects, like the Cameron, okay, that's not it. Avila Cameron. Okay, so I don't want to go into my projects. I don't want to make this a big thing, but I posted like my SOSI survey materials for people to like import into that survey program and adopt if they want. So I also was going to show you a couple examples of really good exemplar projects. One of the ones that comes to mind is that I also think is just kind of a neat way of doing things is the way Heather Uri did this at Tufts. So she also did the Danae's project, and she had a big class. I think it was, you know, 200 students who were in this class. She had 5 teaching assistants, and I feel like it was undergraduate experimental psychology class. So this is one of the reasons why they picked Sparkman or Danae's, sorry, is because it was a experimental study, experimental design. And she did this project and another one in sort of 2 phases. So in the first phase, so she picked the study that everybody was going to complete, the Danae's et al. In the first phase, the students in the class acted as the participants for just a straight up direct replication. And then in the second phase, they all were divided up into groups and asked to develop extension hypotheses, and then added those extension hypotheses and collected more data from more participants. And you can read about this in their wiki. This is, I think, a really nicely detailed wiki. They added any edits they had up at the top, sort of in reverse order. They describe their recruitment here. Can you see this okay? Okay.
Yes.
So, and talked a little bit about the pedagogical purposes that participating in the research served, and then they recruited people, you know, for this next process. There's one part in here, Ken, like this is very deep. This is much more detailed than I usually do, but this is a big project. Let's see if I can find this. So if we go to, at one point they had a list of all of the different extension hypotheses that folks had, and this may be under materials. But I know at one point they had like a rationale for each of their extension hypotheses on these, and maybe I can track that down and send it to you, or maybe I'm confusing it with their Sparkman and Walton. Maybe in this case they didn't have extension hypotheses, but they did for so This is just so much easier than going through the search function on the OSF. So this was the Sparkman and Walton one that they did, and this is where they did the replication with extension. And what I want to show you is their replication and extension component. So this is where they extended it. And then here they had all of their discussions of the different extensions that they had. And at some point they had a list of all of the different hypotheses. If I can find this one specific page I'm looking for, I'll send it to you. I just think it's been neat for me to read, not in terms of like, well, I want to try to do the same thing, because I think a lot of this is like not how I do research, and it can look a little intimidating when I open it, and that's fine. I mean, I think she had like 5 graduate students sort of helping her each of these semesters, and they were interested in doing this from like a content area. But I think looking at these things gives me some ideas for how I might want to incorporate it into my class. And so just, you know, I would try to just keep in mind when you're looking at stuff like this, that it can look really intimidating, that it can look like, woof, like, I don't know if I'd be able to pull that off because it's a lot and it's just not what I'm used to. And I think that that's fine. You know, don't worry about that. There also is a list of good, you know, well done pages that you can find pretty easily from the CREP main page. If you go to, I believe, the Getting Started tab, there should be a link to, yes, under example projects, a list of nicely done projects that hasn't been updated for a while and should be updated soon. But you can kind of get the idea of how people have done these. Yeah, there are no projects on this list that have my name in them. So, okay, so what's the one that I picked? So here's the Tentori et al., which is a tough study. But you can see how their page is set up, how it has, you know, their data and results. Like, we just tried to find a few exemplars of well done projects that you could look at, that you could send your students, so they can kind of see like what it might look like. And then I have a couple examples too of places where, and I think this may be linked in the step-by-step guide, or it could be in the CREP for Instructors materials, where like what it might look like if you have more than one team completing a project, the same project in a semester, where it's like, okay, group 1 has this component. Have you all seen something like that? Do I have it linked? Oh my gosh, Carol, you are a lifesaver. Oh, page not found. Oh gosh, why can't I see it? Can you see it? All right. OSF is gonna OSF. It's because I put the parentheses on the end of the URL. Okay, yes, so these are the, yes, thank you so much. This is what I was looking for. I like showing this to my students as an example when we talk about extension hypotheses, because there are just so many different ideas in one place. And I think some of them are, you know, theory-based and some of them are not. And they get a good range of like what different extension hypotheses might look like. So yes. Okay, so, but I do have a couple of these examples somewhere of, you know, team 1 did this, team 2 did this, and then all of the data are posted together. And I will make sure that I can find a link to those. Ellen, did you say you had one of those?
Yeah, you referred me to somebody's, and so we modeled it after that. I mean, there's lots of mistakes, and it's not pretty, but we wanted to show just.
I mean, that is research, right? Let me try to find that again, and then I'll link it either this week or next week. I want to leave some time for, yeah, just an open discussion of, you know, different ideas and things that you might want to do with CREP, and give folks some time. Yeah, just open it up for conversation. So yes. we are conversing now. Oh, does Amazon donate anything?
Jeff Bezos keeps it all. No, I don't know. I was just wondering, you know, maybe they have a.
Right. It's funny, we were, Mark and I were having a conversation earlier about like what our next steps are, for CREP. And that was one of the things that, we've been thinking about or I'd been thinking about that I kind of sprung, which was, trying to find funding so that students could pay participants for collecting data. I think that's a huge bonus for students to be able to do. Oh, it's a cat.
I had a question regarding, because you said for the one of the projects, she was able to use her own students as participants originally. This one, is that typically is that like fine, or like, I guess I don't know if like maybe for a methodology course that would be like with like a content course, does that have to go through the IRB, or like is it very similar as long as you provide an alternative assignment they can opt out of? Because I was just wondering of, since I'm going to more of a smaller school that's not like an R1 or has like thinking about
And this is, yes, this is all, it's hard to get enough participants, right? So the way she did it, she actually got IRB approval to run this in her class. And she did it at the beginning of the semester. And it was one of the very first things they did was collect, they acted as participants like the first day or two of class. Then they talked about the study. Then she introduced CREP. So it's all like above board. You could have them do it, kind of cold, like without going through IRB, and then just not share the data. And I think that's great too. So, what the one thing that happened with her study, both of these studies, that I think was kind of a challenge from the CREP end, and this is not related to your question at all, so I'm sorry, but was she had to get study one up and going before she had time for CREP review. So both times it was kind of like a rush to get that done, just because of the way like her semester timing went. And so what we ended up doing with her was saying, okay, we can do the review before study two. And if there are any problems with the review that that touch on the methodology or anything like that, then we can't use that data. We don't want you to submit that data. And so it was sort of like a after the fact review. But she had contributed to CREP before, and we felt comfortable with that. And it worked out okay in that case. So I probably, when we go to write up that Danae's paper and that Sparkman and Walton paper, I'm sure that stage one data, whoever writes that up will have good reason to include it.
Jordan, I might have an answer to Jacob's logistical question.
Sure, yeah.
So from a small school standpoint, sometimes I have a colleague collect the informed consent, and then, so I do this in some of my classes where a colleague will come in and consent them, and then take the consent forms and take the data and then de-identify it and give it back to me, so that you can get around some of these, coercion pieces that the IRB is going to look for. And that's been really successful for me, so.
Also, I did something similar in that I did the Stellar et al. Work in my class last fall, and first day fun activity I ran them and as participants in the study, but I didn't get approval. I was just planning for that to be a pedagogical exercise, so I didn't worry about that ahead of time, and that was helpful for me to see where the hiccups might be when students try to run it. And not stress out about, collecting all the perfect data. And I think it was helpful for them just to see how it goes. So even if you're not going to use the data for CREP, I would suggest doing something like that where they get to be the participants, and then they can say oh, well, when I did this part, I had questions about this instruction, and that helped.
Yeah, that's a super cool idea.
And it depends on your individual IRB. Some IRBs will want instructors to run teaching activities through the IRB, even though the federal regulations don't require it. So 45 CFR 46 has an exemption for activities that are part of the curriculum and part of the teaching. So they're not even covered under federal regs. But some institutional IRBs overreach, in my opinion, and say we want to approve everything. So
Yeah, we're they're so idiosyncratic across institutions, and that's been one of the big I would say that is probably about 25% of my one-on-one meetings with people, is just working through like how does this work for IRB? How does like the Cameron et al. Was an interesting study because none of the images that were used were like copyrighted or had permission. They're just like downloaded from the internet. So some people's IRBs had problems with that and others didn't. And like, it was just really interesting how it, yeah. And I'm not an expert in ethics review, but I can like identify ways that other people have sort of gotten around things and can write a letter. I know, Ellen, you're laughing. I have no idea what to do with VCU. I don't know.
I'm just thinking, like, can I do a multi-site with somebody else and they get IRB approval? Would VCU go for that?
I don't know. I don't know what they would go for. I have nightmares about VC.
One other thing that we did, and I was telling about this with my small group, was my IRB or our IRB chair suggested that that I submit the study, like the main IRB first, and then have the students and their extension groups they were doing extension hypotheses, but just do an addendum. So it got pushed through a little faster and they were all exempt, and that helped a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that is what we do. I think we talked about that at one point too, didn't we?
You probably did.
Yeah,
I know I talked to you last summer.
Yeah, because ours are weird. It's like there are no laws. I don't know. This is like ours will take a while to do the initial review, but then amendments, we don't have exempt review or expedited review. But the modifications will go through committee pretty quickly. And especially if they're, things that are sort of just really easily tacked on to that big initial study. So all of like the participant recruitment stuff stays the same, informed consent stays the same. It's just some new questions they're looking at. So I think that's a great idea. They have too much time on their hands. Don't tell them that. I'm gonna have to edit this video. So yeah, more questions. I'm like getting to the point where my AirPods are dying and I have to keep swapping out one ear with the other ear. Sorry. Okay, I'm back.
Again, I'm kind of coming back to the problem that I'm sure all of us have, which is time, and not necessarily even just the amount of time in the semester, in a one semester research methods class, for example. The amount of time during the semester, I think I could pull it off in terms of the amount of time during the semester. But I'm feeling like, especially for this fall, there's a lot of time outside of the class that each of us is going to need to prepare not only ourselves, but also to prepare materials for our students, to, figure out how to integrate learning a lot of the logistical and infrastructure kinds of components to CREP. And and I guess there's no way around that. We just have to be intrinsically motivated enough to want to create this experience for our students versus, what I do now, which is essentially students work in groups of 4 or 5, and they write a complete research proposal. And that's my authentic research experience, which I don't even really consider very authentic, but that's kind of as close as I can get, given I have, a 4-4 teaching load, service, everything else. Can't hear you. Not yet.
Okay.
Yep,
Sorry.
there you go.
It was when I did the swap out of the I just called it Airbud, but that's a movie. Earbud. So yeah, this is a like John and Nikki Legate and I, like, we used to do roundtables where we talked about this a lot, because some folks do like really this is what I tend to do, really structured versions of this. And John tended to not have this structured at all. So in your class where you have 4 or 5 students who are in a group and they can do whatever study, one of the things that John has talked a lot about doing when I've talked to him is this is a founder of the CREP, John Gray, who's talking at the CREPeCon on Monday. He'll just tell his groups, like, this is one option for a study you can do, and like follow the CREP procedures and reach out to them when you need help. And and then it's in their hands, and they have to figure out kind of how to do it. And it is sort of an unstructured thing. I tend to prefer more structure. I think there's some really good pedagogical reasons to not be as structured, but at the end of the day, like, I kind of try to think through what are the things that are really important for me that they learn and that they get out of it, and just try to, like, balance that out as much as I can with the free time. But yeah, it can take, to do it really well, it can take a long time. I tend to do some more flipped stuff where we do stuff outside of class, and then when we come in, we're just working on CREP, either as a whole class or as groups. And so that is our time working on the project, is just that hands-on stuff, because we don't have like separate labs or anything like that.
I think John probably would correct me on this, but I'm pretty sure that John's students are on the more high functioning end of undergraduates at PLU. It's private, relatively selective, versus my regional public state university, that, most of my students are relatively unprepared for college work in general, never mind psychology research. And so, depending on the context, some of us need, as you said, more structure for our students, and some of us can kind of let them run with it.
Well, he was also teaching in these classes like upper level capstones too, and it's a different game with like a small group of 400 level students who have, it's their multiple experimental design courses. It's like their undergrad thesis basically, and sort of, I think that if those same students were going to be supervised at the 200 level, their first research class, like, they would need more structure.
or could benefit from more structure. And I think the structure helps us a lot too well, I'm not going to get halfway through the semester and have all of these different teams have emergency needs where I have to be like meeting with them. So preventing that is really important too. And I tend to err on the side of, right, like I put on my own mask first, right? Like I err on the side of, well, what are the things that are going to make sure that I am like mentally healthy throughout the semester so that my students have like maybe the project is a 95 on the meaningfulness scale instead of 100, but I'm hackier and healthier, and that makes everybody else happier and healthier too. So that's the teaching. I think that's the teaching hackathon. I think that's the goal, is like to get those materials to so that somebody can like go into the class who's teaching research methods and line up like, okay, your first week of class, you know, here's a reading on CREP and here's a multiple choice quiz and here's just very basic level, like here is the day that here's a 45-minute activity you can do in your class where they sign up for a study just like you did, and like have them tell them like where they can plug this in and what they will have had to learn by that point to do it. And the instructor can pick the study and, you know, do the IRB and stuff before the semester even starts, but then everybody's kind of collecting data in their own little group. And I think that that's the next step. And I think that can really, we can make some progress on that during that hackathon. I'm being careful about saying that too much because I'm like, well, we don't have that much time. But if what comes out of that is a list of things that needs to still be done, it's like, well, I can work on checking that off with some eager volunteers.
I will say too.
I think,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think Ellen's idea about ambiguity is good as well. I'm sorry, Carol.
Yeah, no, that is good. And I will say last year, so before, my students had been doing just whatever projects and running studies. So doing CREP actually gave me more of a structure, and it was a bit of a learning curve just in terms of using the OSF and everything. But I think it actually took less time, or at least more enjoyable time, where I could focus on really knowing that one study and guiding them through that. Like I knew what their background research was, and I didn't have to learn a new field. And also, kind of to Mark's point earlier about when you do the walkthrough video and post it publicly, like you kind of feel like, oh, this is important. When students, you know, saw their names added to the OSF page and they're like, ooh, this is online and this is like part of a big thing, they got excited. And I, granted, have done this just once, but I found a lot more even participation in my groups than I typically do. There were fewer people who just kind of drifted away or disappeared or things like that. So I think that to me was an added value, if that gives some perspective. But
yeah, I think that's great. And the question about, you know, can we share materials too? I think, yeah, absolutely. We can set up like a Google Drive. I have an OSF page set up just for this workshop. And so I can add you as contributors and you can add components to it and put stuff in the wiki. We've tried like doing Slack and stuff before, but like Slack, I'm not paying for that. And messages go away after like 3 minutes. So, and then Google Drive is like a little, so the nice thing about adding stuff to OSF is that you can edit the wiki and you can like say what the material is and like give context to it and stuff like that. So I'll get that set up so people can share their stuff. And I can make it, you know, just for workshop participants. For now, I mean, I'd keep in mind that maybe at some point this would be shared more widely, maybe, because we would want other people to be able to contribute too. Amazing and so helpful. Thank you. Can you fill out my rate, my professor, and say exactly those things? This is a class, right? Ellen, you made me panic because we had 2 themes for the semester and I just read take off the mask. And I was like, oh God. I felt a little triggered by that.
So kind of along these lines, I know we've been talking a lot about the front end and posting on the sites on the data and results, asking for definitely not a friend, but me. Is there a limit to how late we can post that data
No,
after
not at
running the
all.
study, as long as it's not closed yet? Okay.
Yeah.
I went on
and
sabbatical last semester, so everything was like
no, totally.
stopped and I ran.
I have projects from 2000, like whatever, that I need to wrap up. And so one of the things I want to do over the next couple of semesters, it just depends on how much free time I have, is have like kind of a working group where we can all like get together and do like a Zoom where we all put together our stuff from our, even if we don't talk to each other, just to have a like a space where we can get our stuff together and submit it, and we can get that completion stuff done and just like kind of feel good about it. And so when that happens, I'll, reach out to people. I mean, following CREP on Twitter is probably the best way to keep up with news about how, like, when and how stuff is happening. And I'm trying to find a better way to do that, but I don't really want to email everybody every time there's like one little thing that's happening. But yeah, I think, there's no statute of limitations on it. I just sent Dana a completion certificate for a project from 7 years ago. So.
Damn, I didn't realize it was 7 years ago.
I know.
Remind me how old I am.
I know. I have a 7-year-old at home, and I'm like, that's wild. Time is weird. Okay, so kind of concluding thoughts for today. I want to, I will be in touch with you over the next couple days about how to get scheduled for individual meetings. Again, if you want them, you do not have to do them. If you are not going to be free from that 10 to 2 time period of our normal workshop, and you want to meet with one of us, please email me and let me know when you're free. Good. And please do that, I don't know, like today, tomorrow. And make sure you tell me in there if there's like somebody specifically you really want to work with. And then Mark and Jared and I will plan on being around from 10 to 2, next week for people who are dropping in and who want to have those individual meetings. If there's a specific time that you want, let me know, and we'll have like a sign up sheet of different times. So just keep an eye on your email. If you are working on this stuff and you have just like a quick question and you're like, I want to put this in my fall class, or I want to work on my materials, please email me. Let me know if you see something that you would like to develop for CREP. That would be great. I can help you with it. I would appreciate that. I'm sure other instructors would too. And also know that stuff like that, CREP, if you contribute things, I can write on CREP letterhead, letters for your, promotion and tenure, whatever, that say like, this is what they've contributed, this is why it's important. And so, keep that in mind, that there could be something helpful that comes out of that. Okay, so thank you. And then we'll see everybody back in 2 weeks, and that will be our big extension hypothesis extravaganza. And yes, thank you. Oh my gosh. Bye. Have fun. I hope it's not too hot where you are. Jacob, I'm answering your question right now. Okay, I'm going to stop